Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's Innovator Series webinar, How to Get Your Projects PR Ready. I'm Liza Hausman, the Vice President of Industry Marketing here at House, and very excited to bring this guest webinar to you today. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to cover some administrative things. The first is that on the right, you'll see a chat section in the little box on your right, the control panel. And if you have any questions or technical difficulties, please enter them there during the webinar and somebody will address them. And if we don't get to your questions during the webinar, don't worry, we will make sure to follow up with you after the webinar and get your questions answered. So with that, again, super excited to talk about this hot topic and introduce our presenter today, Amy Fleury. Welcome. Amy is an editor and contributor to some of the biggest magazines on the newsstands out there today. Everything from Country Living to Condé Nast Traveler, InStyle, Better Homes and Gardens. She has a book called Recipe for Press, and it's been called The Small Business Blueprint for DIY Publicity. So we're really going to be arming you today with things that you can do. Amy's lectures and workshops serve to further educate entrepreneurs like all of you out there on how to refine their message, engage the media, and create relationships with editors and bloggers. So Amy, again, welcome. We're so excited to have you, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak on this. It is a popular subject and probably increasing in popularity simply because the opportunities for design professionals have really escalated in the last few years. And by way of just a little bit more background, so your audience understands the perspective by which I wrote these books. I did come from the editorial world, and I was on the other side of the table for over 20 years, looking for people like designers, architects, product designers, shop owners, and looking to tell their story and really understanding how to really place stories with, magazines across the country. And when I decided to transition from that editorial life and career, I wrote this first book on the left, Recipe for Press, and it was kind of a generalist, generalist guide. If you were an entrepreneur, here were the fundamentals that here's what every editor everywhere wanted you to know about how to pitch them. And the book on the right, Recipe for Press Designer Edition, just issued a year ago. And this is specifically for this industry because as I spoke, I could see very easily that the largest audience was interior design professionals. So I wrote this book for your world. And I thought that it would be good to share how an editor thinks, because from my point of view, the best way into the pages of any magazine, any blog, any online publication is to think like an editor. And this is how an editor thinks. If I were to visually tell anyone's story, you can see that I'm not going to hear or just look for the whole story. I'm going to look for a number of stories within your story. And if I were to say the number one thing for anyone to understand about how to get press on their own is to understand that the editor is not interested in hearing your whole story or often seeing the whole project. They're interested in the part of the project, in the part of your story, in the part of your business that makes sense to the pages that they write specifically. When you start to understand that and really look at, what you're pitching with that in mind, thinking like an editor, it will very much focus your pitch efforts and get you placement faster. When I talk about the pitching your project, oftentimes I would see designers say, well, I've got this whole project, and they really felt like the whole project was going to be placed all at once. And while that does happen, it rarely happens. Very few magazines are going to run a whole project. And from a strategic, point of view, and with an editor's cap on, you could learn how to get many placements out of one project instead of thinking and really tying up the whole project.
So Amy, do you get questions often about, how to get enough content on a narrow topic? And I think that may be something that people feel challenged with, or why they try to pitch an entire project. Like, how much do you need to make a story?
Oftentimes, in working with design professionals, I hear, well, the whole project isn't complete anyway, because a whole project can take 3 to 4 years to complete. And sometimes we don't want to even photograph a whole project. Sometimes I will advise you then go in and photograph the rooms that are complete, especially if they are main rooms, kitchen and bath stories, indoor out stories. Because as you can see, even in the way I talk about them, I'm talking about them as a story. Narrowing it is actually your better bet.
And that's a great tip, because if some projects are taking longer, but a room gets complete, they could take that and run with it as a story.
That's oftentimes the case, because when you're shooting for editorial, really styling those rooms, filling them out is the best idea. And sometimes the homeowners aren't ready for that yet across the entire house. But you can get both. There's just a lot that you can accomplish in having a half-day photo shoot for a few key rooms. Not only that, I have seen, because Instagram is so completely consuming and important these days too, when you shoot something like this, say you just shot a half day, but you were sharing a little bit of behind the scenes, for example, not whole room pictures, don't give away the entire room, but you're sharing that you're shooting. You're also messaging editors that are following you that you have a project where you have at least, something new to look at and to consider. So there's a lot of strategy behind even just taking a half-day shoot, when especially when there's in pitching it as a kitchen and bath story, or if there's something really special about that room, if it's a great color story, pitching it as such.
Got it.
Okay. This picture is just showing that this formula that I put forward in my initial book, and because there are pitch examples, it's really a formula. Once you really get this, once you really embrace it, people get press. And that's exactly what this was. Someone from New York sharing, I got my first placement after I followed this formula. This idea and the way I've put things forward in these books just takes the mystery out of what editors want, what they need, what they don't, how long the pitch should be. And we can talk about some of that today, but that's what I'm sharing there. And I also want to mention that I also have to daily use my own advice, as I have an art project that is very much geared towards a luxury, high-end fashion client. And what me and my partner Nikki Nye do are make paper wigs for luxury fashion houses. And we live in Athens, Georgia, not exactly the nexus of fashion, but we have courted and received every commission by way of press. just by way of being prepared to share our images. How did these creative directors find us? They didn't find us. Their assistants found us. And they found us on a blog or in a magazine, and they tore it out or shared a link with the creative director. This is exactly how magazines operate. Very rarely do you want to go to the editor-in-chief or the senior editor. And you were going to find more success breaking in with the assistant editor. They are the gatekeepers to a lot of information. And not only that, they are going to be senior editors in a matter of a few short years. So you want to really create relationships in editorial, and they will bear fruit over many, many years.
That would be great.
They're so basic. They're so basic. And we might think it's more complicated than this, but The reason you see the same people getting press is they have great pictures, they're quick to respond, they don't get upset when the placement falls through because they understand there will be a next time. They have good pictures. It's oftentimes that an editor will need to fill a page, or they'll need to fill, say, a quarter of a page. They've got one spot left and they've got to fill this thing before 5. They go back routinely to the people that they have worked with before who they know they can pick up the phone and call and say, do you have something new? And who they know will respond quickly. When you get there, those editors start to call you rather than you always pitching them.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure designers and architects, right, and as all professionals know who their go-to people are who are always responsive.
That's exactly right. Today, what I'm seeing increasingly so is that this idea of press is really much broader than just getting press. That press even looks different today. It takes shapes in our own universe, in our blogs and our newsletters. And we have traditional press, and manufacturers also have to have these newsletters and sometimes their own publications, and we have trade publications. Communications is good business these days. You have to have devote more time, more resources to managing this, to creating point of view. So I don't think I'm surprising anyone by saying that the new publicist is you. And even if you can afford a great publicist, it behooves you to understand that you are still needing to support their efforts by understanding communications in-house and how not to undermine efforts of somebody doing it on your behalf. So it's a great place to start to learn. I think when we just understand why we are doing it, it becomes a lot easier and aligns with business a lot more quickly. If anyone ever asks me, or tells me they want press, my first question is going to be why. If you know where you want to go, then you create a roadmap for that. It's pretty simple. You create a roadmap, you create a plan, and you figure out the shortest way to get there. So this is a really, really critical question that will help you align your efforts and help you from wasting time.
Are there any wrong reasons for wanting press? Some people might say, well, it's going to help me grow my business, or it might help me build a brand because I want to grow my business in different directions. Maybe some people are just I think I like the cachet of it. It feels good. I like, it's a good kind of pat on the back. Does that make any, new or different challenges for getting press?
No, not really. The cachet and pat on the back, I think that wears thin really quickly because it takes some effort to get to even support press. You have to really think about your responses and take the time. You have to have the pictures available to support that. And while it feels good, if your business is going well, it becomes less important. But if you told me, I want press because I've covered my area, but I would like more clients in a neighboring city, then that would help me direct where you need press. So if we're outside of Atlanta and you want more clients in Atlanta, then I would focus press efforts to the publications that the clients that you want are reading in Atlanta, specifically in their neighborhood, instead of saying, oh, I think I should be in House Beautiful, because really being in House Beautiful is not going to serve that effort. So the more you can focus the why, the more your press plan will be focused and will serve that goal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I love talking about targeting press with a clear point of view because when I was a writer and when I was looking for stories, that's what I'm looking for. So rather than looking like everyone else or sounding like everyone else, you certainly want to have your website be you, because we're looking for things to share that are different. And so here's a great example. They share a passion for textiles and surface design. While it's not every post that they do on their social channels, it does populate, so that common thread is ever present. it's ever present in their point of view of their own personal design. It's how they present themselves. It's in their business card. It's in the clothes they wear, that pattern, that textiles, that textile design, and that juxtaposition. It's important to them. And so it's expressed through them and through their projects and their writings and what they put out on their social media channels. It's really something to think about before you start to share, because you're helping focus the writers if you can focus yourself a little bit. And I would say even in architectural firms, it's the same thing, because we're looking for what makes you tick and how have you expressed that in a way that stands out, that tells that story. And I think Mark English was a great example of that on his website. It's very clear to me with just a few clicks that his practice is in tune with nature. There's a sense of artistry that is important. I believe I even remember he had a special studio that was located in a former sculptor studio. But it's the common thread through all of the visual points that I could get to quickly. I clearly know what's important right away. It doesn't mean I'm going to find that in every project, because not every client is the same, but what makes this firm who they are, I understand with a few clicks. Shall we talk about pictures?
Let's do it. I know everybody that wants to know.
Well, I will say that if I could only say one word in this entire webinar, I would say photography. And that's hard because I'm a writer by nature, but in this day and age, we are very much visually motivated. I know that with editors, they are going to look at the pictures before the pitch. They're going to decide very quickly if they should move forward with your pitch by the pictures. But I'm going to first start with asking how many of you have a great portrait of yourself. I think it's easy to express what I mean by editorial portrait with this example, because this is someone I worked with who thought the picture on the left of her was a good editorial portrait. But when an editor is looking to see, are you ready for press? A strong indicator would be, do you have a great picture of yourself, an editorial press ready picture? And on the right is the example that I would say really clearly shows what I'm talking about. Same woman. I realize people don't go to installs looking like this, but we're in the business of aspirational storytelling. That is the nature of publications. You want to have pictures that say, I already look like I belong in the pages of the publications I want to be a part of.
Yep, and we like to talk to pros all the time about how important it is to have a great profile picture on your house profile and your website that really helps people connect with you as a person as well as supports your brand. Because people do link the work to personal photos more than you think that they actually do. So the photo of you or your team has to match the aesthetic of your work.
It's so true, and that's exactly what I was talking about. It's in your personality. People want to connect, and they're looking for something to connect to, and they don't know you. Editors want to know that you're ready for press, and that means if I see a good picture of you on your site, it means there's probably one more behind there that hasn't been used or published or that I could use. Another truth is that publications don't have the massive budgets that they once did. And if they're faced with two great designers that they could write about, and one of them has a great portrait of themselves, and this is for a profile story, and one of them doesn't, more than likely they're going to go with the one that has the photography that they can use, because they simply don't have the budget, or maybe they don't have the time to send the photographer. And I'm not saying this is a blanket statement that nobody sends photographers anymore. Many publications use the images that are provided to them because they simply do not have the time or the budget. So when they look and see, like, wow, this looks like it already belongs in my pages, you're halfway in the door. I would just make it a practice to update your portraits at least once a year. But in this business, if you are really going for press, twice a year. One of the quickest inroads into those pages that you want to be a part of is through the photographers who work for them, because most of those photographers are freelancers, and most of those freelancers have the ear to the editors, and that's a hot tip.
I think those are good suggestions. I think, obviously if that photographer is working with that magazine, it's a photographer that the magazine trusts, and building a relationship makes sense.
Correct. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is they think they're on staff for that magazine. And they're not. They're freelancers, but they're in touch with those editors all the time. And so those editors, they're not able to get out to every location. They bend the ear of those photographers. Who are you seeing? What are you seeing? Because it's a great resource for them. I'm often asked, who do I get to take pictures that look like they belong in these magazines? And my answer is always, look at the bylines of the magazines you want to be a part of. Then go to that photographer's personal website, and you will see indications of their work and see if it's a good fit for you. Understanding that the reason that these portraits are so important is because oftentimes an editor may not need yet the project. They may not be looking for a project, but they may be looking for one picture in a project and the designer's portrait. Maybe they're looking for a designer to speak on or to join a panel at market and speak on something. They're always going to ask you for that portrait, and then maybe they'll share some of your work too. But there are just so many times that you're going to be asked when you get into the hang of getting press placements, and that you're asked for your portrait first before you're ever asked for anything from a project. This is a great example of that. This is an editor who asked the designer for a roundup of her favorite things based on a concept of black and gold. But that's why having those images and having a few of them are so critical, because this is a highly coveted placement, but it really is not talking about any project. I would also suggest that you have pictures of your studio, of your office, especially with designers, because I imagine your offices are fabulous and there's a story there. In addition, we need the projects photographed beautifully. There are many stories, many opportunities for storytelling. Editors are always looking for angles, and sometimes those being supported by a great picture just gets the editor listening faster. That big question that I hear so often is, where do I find the right photographers?
We highly encourage professional photography and using professional photographers. There are more than 25,000 professional photographers that have listed themselves on Houzz, and you can see their work and see all their contact information. Lots of top photographers are all on here as well. One of the great things is that we have a kind of a subset. If you go to houzz.com/get photos, you can actually see photographers that have made special pricing for pros on Houzz. So if you are going to work with them for the first time, they have discounted packages and affordable packages that make it easy for you to kind of get started with professional photography. And the great thing about using the directory is you can go through and see whose work you think kind of is representative of the types of images that you want to present for your brand and your company.
Certain photographers have certain styles, and I've worked with design professionals long enough to know that you're looking to connect with photographers that share a sensibility. So I think having a directory like this and really connecting, poring over their projects is just an incredible tool. By the time we get to the pitch, I tell you that the pitch has gotten awfully simple. It is the homework to get to what makes the pitch simple. That's where the work is. Because our attention span is so short, and because we're inundated with emails, the key to a successful pitch is to make it as concise as possible. So lose the fluff, but support it with a few teaser images that gets the editor's attention and gets them coming back. What I want to really impress today is that the images that you provide in the pitch embedded directly into the email. And we're not talking about every picture that you want to pitch. I'm talking about no more than 4 if we were looking at a project. And if we were pitching as a profile story, then no more than 2 pictures. But that we are going to look at the images first, and they should take up a good body of that email pitch. And then we're going to read. Bullet points can help an editor find a story or really understand if this is something they can work with. That begs the question of, well, when do we follow up? How do we follow up? And the best tip I can give you is you follow up with the same images that you pitched with, because sometimes just that visual nudge is exactly what the editor needs to remember, like, oh, I really was interested in this, and you keep the follow-up very, very concise. Secondly, you follow up when you're talking about projects. You really want to give an editor time, understanding that projects take a long time to place. It is not unusual for an editor to take months. And so we're in the long game of patience when we're talking pitching projects. You really only want to follow up one time. And it's tough sometimes because you say, well, if I follow up once and I'm still left hanging, that next time that you reach out should be to say, I just wanted to let you know I haven't heard from you. I'm assuming this is not a good fit, but I wanted to give you first right of refusal. So thank you so kindly for your consideration. So that is 3 touch points. At that point, you are free to move along. But a big no-no of pitching, and we'll go over some of those, is pitching the same idea, the same project at the same time to competing editors. Editors love these things. I think familiarity with the publication is the golden rule of pitching. Do not pitch until you have read that publication. And I know none of you listening would ever do that, but editors have a nose for it. They can sense it in the email that, wow, you didn't listen to the podcast before you pitched yourself as a potential guest, or you didn't even read the magazine to know that we don't run profiles, but you're pitching a profile. Really, again, the quickest way into those pages is to read the things, familiarize yourself with even the names of the people who are producing those stories, because they are your biggest ambassadors. They are looking for the next story to produce. They care about those stories, is what I'm suggesting. And you want to help get editors halfway there, and they will take it from there. And we've talked about the pictures. Sometimes an old idea could be made new if it's pitched on something that is timely, like weather or color of the year. You might have a picture from a project a long ago, but it had living coral, for example, all over it. And that picture could be pitched as a potential supporting image to you as an expert or a designer who wants to talk about this, simply because it is pitched alongside something that is timely. And we talked about quick responders who in complete information, so we don't have to be coming back and forth asking, what's the website, what's to, the architect, these things that could go concisely in the pitch or in bullet points. Just reciprocity and support are sometimes the best PR that you can give. Not always about you if it's not a good fit, but if you share something that is, and that editor, that is seeding relationships, that's the nature of this business. You better believe that editor would remember that before anything and come back when they had another idea and they're looking for new people to write about. And these are the things that editors everywhere loathe. And my name is only 3 letters, but it has been misspelled on a number of occasions, or I've been called by my last name. To understand that they're just looking for a reason to delete because they are inundated with noise, with people who haven't put in the homework to help them really get the best things in those pages. That becomes a little bit of a problem where somebody pitches too many images. It just means you personally didn't edit those down. You personally didn't give me the teasers that I need to then ask for more. or you've shared all of these good pictures all over your blog or your own website or your social channels, meaning that I now consider that published. I think these are universal, though. I think this applies to business. How do y'all feel about that?
I think that's probably the case for all of us, right? It's a relationship, and if you want to be able
Mm-hmm.
to work with that person time and time again, then you have to treat them, like you're having a long-term relationship.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true because editors will share with each other and they are small networks. So when something fabulous would come across my desk, but I had nowhere to go with it, I couldn't help myself. It's so good. I want it to go somewhere. That's our nature. Because we're generally convivial with our peers, we might just kick that pitch to somebody who we know would love it and could do something with it. But also understanding that these editorial groups are small is somebody who, you know, is ugly with them or who comes back and says, instead of just a simple thank you, instead you hear, well, wow, I didn't get the coverage that I thought I was going to get, or this, I thought it was going to be a full page and it's only a quarter page, or I didn't get as much traffic as I thought I would. And that feels terrible as an editor to hear because you don't always have the final say over all of those last details, how big or how small the editorial spread's going to be, how many pages, what pictures, because there are a number of people involved. But what is true is that there's a lot of work that goes into putting these things together, and that is what they care about. And so just understanding that you are building relationships that just gratitude, just simple gratitude and supporting each other will go a long way towards future press. So another inroad into editorial is to go where the editors go. Not all that long ago, we didn't have to get out. We could happily stay in our cubicles and then take our appointments. But now you'll see editors are out in the public more. They're supporting the publishing brand. Their education is just a big deal, a big hot topic, and they're called on to give similar talks that I'm sharing today. And so there you have a little more access to these editors. And they also need support. They also want to see people in those chairs. It's a great time and a place to show that support and to ask questions and to introduce yourself. It is never the time to pitch because they're kind of overwhelmed being out there. It's just not appropriate, but it is a great time to put a name to a face. That is a wonderful time to connect. And there are so many of these, and I'm shocked at the major editors that are present at these conferences. This was at Design Bloggers Conference last year in LA. Swarms of editors and podcasters that are really growing in popularity, all there looking for the next person to talk about. It's a time to make the connection and see it a relationship, not the time to pitch. These gatherings, I can't really speak highly enough about. This was one where House was involved at the San Francisco Design Center, and the conversations and the networking at these and after these events are tremendous and great opportunity for discovery, because you'll find that it's not always who you think of as a proper editor that you're pitching. If you have a blog, if you have an Instagram, if you have a newsletter, there are so many opportunities for crossovers between interior design professionals and supporting each other. You can really increase the presence and help positioning by aligning with the right people for your business. And then this page off of the Journal of American Institute of Architects, where there are story after story, even in in the architectural field. So you have to go digging a little bit to look for where these opportunities lie, but there are plenty of them out there, and not one editor would ever tell you that you have to have a publicist to pitch them. I'm going to wrap this session up with just emphasizing again positive relationships, and this being a page out of the book, and this being an example of a fake masthead, which is the key to understanding who pulls together the pages of any magazine or any online magazine or blog. When you get into the other page of it, it says who does what. It's the market editors who look for product. It's the assistant editors who you will get your break into the front of the magazine pages. And it also helps you to understand that that assistant editor was another intern not all that long ago. And today she's a national market editor. And the speed by which she became that is staggering and humbling too, because now I am pitching my former intern story. I think it's back to the original idea that establishing relationships will create many stories over the years. And finally, this is just wrapping up this talk. One thing we hear, my team hears over and over, is how do I remember when to pitch what? And so we created a couple of tools that are available on amyfleury.com under Recipe for Press, and that is where the books are available. But we also create every year a media list. And it is just under 1,000 names of relevant editors and writers in this interiors industry and in the lifestyle industry. There's so much movement. Every 6 months we do an update, and I think since June we tracked movement of 350 editors of the almost 1,000 editors we had, and added 42 new publications and 90 new editor names. So that is a huge time saver, and it's quite affordable at $150, and that is a resource that we've made available to support the DIY PR movement.
That's fantastic, Amy. It's such a great resource.
It's a labor of love, but it's just something that will save you a lot of time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I think a lot of the concepts, obviously it's a great guide to being able to do your own PR. And I think kind of the perspective that you get out of the book and the advice in terms of kind of your brand and your focus, et cetera, can translate to so many things, from your website to your house profile to how you represent yourself kind of in all your interactions. So really appreciate the insights. And
oh yeah, you're so welcome. I think you're so spot on when you say how this translates to your house profiles, because it's so fundamental across all of these channels. These are fundamentals that if you get them right, and streamline these and understand that one supports the next, it will make your life a lot easier.
Awesome. There's so much good info in here. Unfortunately, we run out of time and don't have time to take questions here live with Amy, but we'll make sure that we follow up with you after this webinar and make sure you get connected to the resources that you need. So thanks so much. A big thanks to Amy. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good luck, everyone. Happy pitching.